The COVID-19 pandemic has and continues to affect millions of people globally. Measures such as social distancing and mask mandates have all affected our lives in some way. However, one incredibly notable thing that has emerged from this pandemic is the technology used in the vaccines that were rapidly developed and distributed at an astounding rate. Welcome to the first episode of a trilogy of videos that will explain mRNA. This episode will be about what mRNA is, how it works, and how it is used in a majority of the vaccines that are distributed around the world in the COVID-19 pandemic. Before we can get into what mRNA is, we first have to understand that mRNA is actually a form of RNA. RNA, or ribonucleic acid, is a single-stranded molecule that is present in all living cells, and it is synthesized from DNA by an enzyme called RNA polymerase via a process called transcription. Now, RNA is essentially a messenger, and it carries protein information from DNA to control the synthesis of proteins. mRNA, or messenger RNA, is essentially this. It contains the protein information of DNA from the cell's nucleus to a cell's cytoplasm, and it's the translated version of DNA so that amino acids can form proteins. So mRNA uses the information in the genes to make a blueprint for the proteins. The ribosomes, which are an intercellular structure, translate this information and make the proteins. After the proteins are made, the cells then finally break down mRNA. And now you've got the body's immune system. Now, the immune system is honestly such a fascinating thing, because what it does is that, alright, let's say you've got a virus. Let's just do a quick sketch. Looks like a fried egg, but that's alright. So this is our virus, right? And let's say it infiltrates the body, right? Now, you've got this virus that's kind of floating around, trying to multiply itself and everything, right? Now, the body, when it recognizes a foreign protein that's kind of floating around there, it goes on instant high alert because, if you've got a foreign thing, it could be dangerous, and in this case it is. So what the body does is that it looks at it and it attacks it. The white blood cells, the white blood cells instantly go after it and they start tearing it apart, they eat it and everything, and all is well. But the thing is, what's awesome about this is that they don't just eat the virus and just call it a day. No, there are these things called B cells and T cells, and these things are essentially memory cells. And what they do is that they remember the shape of the virus and they keep it for the future. So in case the person gets reinfected with the virus, the B and the T cells develop these things called antibodies, and the antibodies are like a lock and a key. So it's like, let's say this is the shape of our virus, right? Let's say the outer shape of the virus is this spiky mold, right? This would be your antibody. And if the person gets reinfected with this virus, the antibodies are unleashed and they form like a mold around it. And this mold is essentially, it just breaks apart the virus. And this helps the fight against the viruses like incredibly. Because if it's a full-scale infection, then your white blood cells are going to be having a little bit of a hard time. But with these antibodies, it greatly helps and lessens the infection to the point where the person might not even feel any symptoms. And that's the amazing immune system. Now let's take this knowledge and combine it with our new knowledge about mRNA. Now, first of all, let's talk about COVID. COVID is a virus, and it's part of a group of viruses, or a family, called coronaviruses, and one of their incredibly distinct features is the spike protein, and it's in its name. It's basically a protein that's shaped like a spike, but it's located on the outer membrane of the virus. Now what scientists said was that they said, what if we were to isolate this spike protein and find the genetic code of it? Because remember how in mRNA, it's essentially a way to make proteins? So what if scientists were able to program the mRNA so that it provoked the body to make these spike proteins? And then, like I said, in how I explained the immune system would notice that there's a foreign protein like floating around the body, so it would instantly pounce on it and attack it, and therefore create antibodies for it. And essentially, in the fight against viruses and infection, what you want to do is to be able to create antibodies, recent updated antibodies, so that it's able to latch on to the virus or the protein and destroy it. And that's essentially what happened. But another really big issue that researchers ran into was that, remember how I also said that once the proteins are translated and are created, that the body instantly just breaks down the mRNA? That's a big issue. Because what was happening was that if they would just inject raw mRNA into a person's arm, then the body would just break down the mRNA before it would reach the actual cytoplasm of the cell. And that's an issue, because what it needs to do is that the mRNA needs to be able to get into the cytoplasm for it to actually start producing the desired amino acids. So what scientists did was that, due to the recent development of nanotechnology, they were able to use lipid nanoparticles, or nanoparticles of fats, and they encased the programmed mRNA into this lipid nanoparticle, and they injected it into the body. And what this was able to do was that, let's say you've got your cell here and your lipid nanoparticle there. So basically what the body did was that it saw this thing floating around and it said, oh, let's break down the lipids. And by the time the lipids would break down, the mRNA would have reached the cytoplasm of the cell, and boom, you've got your amino acids. And there you have it. There's your vaccine for COVID. Now, vaccines are not a new concept in any way, shape, or form. They've been around for centuries, almost. And the thing is, what makes them different from mRNA vaccines is that traditional vaccines take the virus, let's use our fried egg virus, and scientists would weaken this virus and inject the weakened virus into the body. I mean, this still has its intended effect. It still recognizes this protein as a weird thing that shouldn't be there, and it attacks it, and then antibodies are made, and all is good. Because at the end of the day, like I said before, creating antibodies is one of the most important things to do if you're trying to fight an infection. However, with mRNA, what's so effective is that the body itself is making the protein, and that creates such a more realistic way and to see of what would happen if an infection were to actually occur. So, and the thing is, with COVID-19, you have the spike protein. The thing is, scientists were able to actually get the genetic code of the spike protein, and honestly, it doesn't really get any more accurate than that. Now, while the side effects are still similar to traditional vaccines with the whole fever, cough, and cold, it's incredibly effective because the efficacy of mRNA vaccines is 95%, and that's really high. The COVID-19 pandemic has been devastating, not only economically but also socially, with everyone having known and felt the impacts of this pandemic. Yet, as I said in my introduction, the vaccine and treatment development has been incredible, with the vaccine having been developed in just over a year. And this includes the actual research, programming, and clinical trials to ensure its safety and distribution. That's awesome. Just to put that into perspective, some vaccines are developed in a decade. mRNA technology is a medical breakthrough, and while it's been in the scene for a little while, it's definitely shined in this pandemic, and it will continue to develop and show its true potential in treating not just COVID-19, but hundreds of other viruses, bacteria, and parasites, which will definitely save millions of people's lives. Yet we still have to remember that vaccines are not just a quick and easy fix. We all still have to remember to practice hygiene, such as washing our hands and not getting too close to people in social gatherings. We're all in this together, and we can all do our part in making sure that we end this pandemic once and for all. I truly believe that the end is in sight. Thank you so much for watching, and I really hoped you learned something. The future episodes will be talking about the history and future of mRNA vaccines. Once again, stay safe and stay healthy, and I'll see you in the next episode.